Kakadosh Erev Tov, Kinyan Mesechta. We are on Mesechet Ta'anit, Daf Daled Amud Bet, 4b. We are by the two dots where the two dots already said. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Havel Ifnei Teva. Somebody that came in front of the Teva. And it was the Yom Tov Acharon Shel Hag. So it's on Shemini Aseret. So it says, Acharon Maskir. What's Acharon? Musaf. Maskir, Mashiv Roch Geshem. Harishon and Maskir. The first one is not going to be Maskir. Then it says, yeah, Biyom Tov Harishon Shel Chag. On Yom Tov Harishon of Pesach, Harishon Maskir, Acharon and Maskir. The first one is going to mention it. The last one is not going to mention it. So last time we went and we said as follows. We said, Uraminu, we have a contradiction. What is the contradiction? Ad matai shoalin et geshamim. So we said that this was until when are we going to ask for rain? Remember, what are we quoting now? A Mishnah on Daf He Amud Aleph. The Mishnah on the next page right here says the Mishnah, Ad matai shoalin et geshamim. Until when are we going to ask for rain? Now remember, when we say usually ask, what do we know later on? What does usually ask mean? Correct? Very good. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Pesach. Until Pesach passes. So now what does that mean pass? That means it includes Chol Hamoed. Very good. Chazak. Rabbi Meir Omer. Ad she'avor Nisan, until the entire month of Nisan passes. Okay, until here. Now, where is the contradiction? The contradiction is very simple. Why? Because you just came and you just told me in the Mishnah, the previous Mishnah, that B'Yom Tov Harishon Shel Pesach, which is the first day of Pesach, Harishon Maskir, ve'acharon eno Maskir. Meaning the first one says Mashiv Roch Geshem, the second one does not say Mashiv Roch Geshem. But now all of a sudden you come and you tell me that here you're going to do it until Chol Hamoed or until the end of Pesach, until the end of the month of Nisan Bichlal. So answers Rav Hasta, Amar Rav Hasta la kashya. It's not a question. Kan lishol vekan laskir. Here it's to ask for rain. And here it's to mention rain. So when it says about the asking of the rain, you ask until the end of Pesach. But to do the mentioning it until the Pesach. Why? Mishal Shayil ve'azil. You continue asking, right, until the end of Pesach or the end of the month. Laskir, but when do you stop mentioning? B'Yom Tov Harishon Pasik. On the first day of Yom Tov, you're going to stop. This is where we stopped last class. Okay? Now the Gemara is going to continue and say, I don't understand nothing. Ce n'est pas compris rien. Shum davar. Nothing. Why? He says, Ribono Shel Olam. Amar Ula. Ula says, Had Rav Chasta kashya. That which Rav Chasta just said now is so difficult. It's kachometz lashinayim. It's like vinegar to your teeth. The ke'ashan la'inayim. And it's like the smoke, right, to your eyes. Yeah, smoke is not good for your eyes. So he comes, so therefore this is based upon the pasuk in Mishle, right? Kachometz lashinayim, ke'ashan la'inayim. Why? It's a kal v'chomer. What exactly is the kal v'chomer? He comes and he says the kal v'chomer is like this. Uma b'makom she'eno sho'el maskir. Says the Gemara, Ribono Shel Olam. If in a place where you're not going to ask, you're going to mention, b'makom she'sho'el, in a place where you ask, eno din she'em maskir, shouldn't it be the halakha that you're going to mention it? What's going on? So to explain this kal v'chomer, what did we learn last time? You remember? What was the kal v'chomer? What was more strict?
When you ask for sure, you're going to mention.
Why? How do we know that? Because on Shemini Atzeret, what do? You ask or you mention? Shemini Atzeret. You ask for rain?
No. We mentioned
You mention the rain, but do you ask it? No. So if right now you're going to mention the rain on Shmini Atzeret, even though you don't ask, so kal vachomer, if you're going to ask, which that's what we're talking about here, that you're asking, and also on Chol Hamoed, you're asking until the end of the month, kal vachomer, you're going to mention it, but because asking for it is much more powerful than mentioning it. So it doesn't make sense. So he says, I don't understand. He says, that what Shlomo Chastak comes in. He says, no, Shoel, Maskir, two different things. Yeah, Tzvei dinim, two different dinim. What are you talking about? Doesn't even make sense. It's a kal vachomer keneged. Yeah? Capish or not? Ah? Amar Ula, but rather Ula says, Tzre Tana'e Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. There are two Tanaim in Shitat Rabbi Yehuda. The first Shita of Rabbi Yehuda is in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says you're going to stop mentioning it on the Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. That means it's the same halachot. So if you stop mentioning it on the first day of Pesach, you stop asking for the first day of Pesach. However, though, the Mishnah later on, which was on Amud Aleph, was another Tana in the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. And he says, until when are you going to ask for it? Until Pesach finishes. The Kol Sheken, you're going to mention it until Pesach finishes. So it's two different Tanaim in the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Let me put it on pause. Outside, and then if we can continue, we should continue. But if not, let me stop. One second. One more time. We stopped right after the words Tre Tanae Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, two Tanaim according to Rabbi Yehuda. Two Shitot of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? It's the one line before, or two lines before it gets thick. Okay? So one more time. I'm going to mention it outside. Outside says like this. We brought down our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda says, Haver lifnei teva, somebody that's going to be shliach tzibur. Yeah. So if Yom Tov Rishon, Yom Tov Acharon Shel Chag, on the last day of Chag, on Shmini Atzeret, last day of Sukkot, Ha'acharon maskir, Harishonim maskir. The last one is going to mention Mashiv Rochel Migash, and the first one is not going to mention Mashiv Rochel Migash. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, on the first day of Pesach, Harishon maskir, Acharon maskir. The first one is going to mention it. The second one is not going to mention it. Says now the Gemara, contradiction. What's the contradiction? Contradiction is, one second. What did we just say now? When do you stop mentioning Mashiv Ruach Megeshem? Musaf of first day of Pesach. Musaf, first day of Pesach. Says the Gemara, what's the contradiction? The next Mishnah. The next Mishnah comes and says in the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, says, until when do you ask for rain? Now it's true, we always know, and we learned this well, that asking is not mentioning. Asking is beten tal umatar livracha. So, not like this. The Mishnah says in Shitat Rabbi Yehuda, we know that there's a difference between asking, mentioning. Asking is beten tal umatar livracha. Mentioning is muridatal. Okay? So now what happens? Says the next Mishnah, until when are you going to ask for V'ten Tal Matal Livracha? Two shitot. Shitat Rabbi Yehuda, Ad Shi'avor Pesach. Ad Shi'avor Pesach includes Chol HaMoed. Until Pesach finishes. So it includes Chol HaMoed. Right? And the other Shita, Rabbi Meir, until the end of the month. Mamash, the end of the month. Yeah, until the end of the month. So now he comes and he says like this. Listen carefully, yeah? He comes and he says like this. He says, one second. You just told me, right? You just told me, right? That what? You just told me that you're going to mention V'ten Tal Matal Livracha until when? Until Pesach finishes. So what do you mean that you're stopping to mention until the first day of Pesach? What's going on? Which one?
No.
Answers the Gemara. I've got a beautiful answer. Kan le'askir ve'kan lishol. There's a difference between asking and mentioning. If it's going to be mentioning, you stop. But if it's going to be asking, you continue asking until the end of Pesach or until the end of the month. So says Ula, Ribono Shel Olam. That's an answer. He says, does that make sense? He says, I have a Kal Vachomer, the exact opposite. It doesn't even make sense. Why? He says, he uses a terminology. That's like vinegar to your teeth. And it's terrible, right? Or he says it's going to be like smoke to your eyes. The answer that I just answered. The answer is terrible. Right? He says, why? Like vinegar. He says, comes and he says, ask the dentist. Yeah, he says, why? Yeah, he says, why? He says, very, very simple. He says, because he comes and he says this. He says, if right now on Shemini Atzeret, what do we do on Shemini Atzeret? We mention. What do we mention? Mashiv Aruach Orida Geshem. What about within Talmud Talibra? We don't ask. Until when? Until whether it's going to be Zayin Shel Mar Cheshvan or in the diaspora until Shishim Yom Acharei Tkufa, whatever the case is. But later. Which one? We don't ask for it. There's the Gemara. If on Shemini Atzeret, I'm going to come and I'm going to mention it but not ask for it. So Kal Vachomer, if I'm asking for it, I'm going to mention it. Kal Vachomer. So I don't understand what you're talking about. So answers the Gemara in Achanami. You're right. You're correct. Tre Tanai Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. What does that mean? Tre Tanai Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. There are two Tanas in the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. The first student, right, which is also a Tana, he was learning in Shitat Rabbi Yehuda like our Mishnah. What does that mean? You finish mentioning Mashiv Aruach Orida Geshem on the first day of Pesach. You finish asking for it. That means the last time that you say V'ten Tamat Talibcha is when? Mincha of Erev Pesach. Mincha of Erev Pesach, you stopped. Who says that? Our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, Daf Bet Amud Aleph. But there's a second Mishnah. The second Mishnah, Daf He Amud Aleph. Mishnah, Daf He Amud Aleph, that Tana in Shitat Rabbi Yehuda says, no. Really, Beme, when do you stop asking for rain? When Pesach finishes. Until the last day of Chol Hamoed Pesach. So he comes and he says, so when do you stop mentioning rain? Last day of Chol Hamoed Pesach. Because like what you just said, whenever you ask, you mention. So therefore, according to that shita, it's two shitot in Rabbi Yehuda. Tre Tanei Aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. We're going to continue now to the next answer. The next answer is Rav Yosef Amar. Rav Yosef comes and he's going to answer a different answer on the contradiction. Remember, we had Rav Chasta. Rav Chasta comes and he says the difference is lishol v'leaskir. Comes Ula and he argues on him. He says, I don't understand what you're saying. It's exact opposite. Fine. Next answer, Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Mayad shi'avor Pesach. You know what? I could take away the contradiction. You know I'm going to take away the contradiction. What was the contradiction? On the first Bet Amud Aleph, in our first daf, it said when first day of Pesach, you stop. Hey Amud Aleph, 5A1, it says, right? Ad she'avor Pesach, until Pesach finishes. It says, that's not the explanation. My ad she'avor ha-Pesach. He says, what does it mean until Pesach passes? Ad she'avor shliach tzibur rishon hayored biyom tov rishon shel Pesach. It's exact same, the exact same shita. It doesn't mean she'avor Pesach means that when Pesach finishes. It means ad she'avor, the first shliach tzibur on Pesach, which is the first Pesach, the first day of Pesach, right? And he's going to do it. Because you could learn ad she'avor Pesach means until Pesach is over. What is over? Finishes, passed over until it's a language. Because no, it wasn't that until Pesach finishes. He says it's until the first shliach tzibur on Pesach comes and he gets up, and that's right. That's a shita of right of Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach. No, that's not Mickey Mouse. I thought you were going to ask for rain. Ad matai sho'alin, until when are you going to ask? No, but here's sho'alin. One second. Until when are you going to ask sho'alin et geshamim? Rabbi Yehuda says ad she'avor et Pesach. Now we thought ad she'avor Pesach means including Chol Hamoed, and therefore if it includes Chol Hamoed, the end of Pesach, we have a contradiction with Bet Amud Aleph. Bet Amud Aleph comes and tells you first day of Pesach, and now we're telling you until we finish Pesach. Says Rav Yosef, what are you talking about? There's no contradiction. When it says ad she'avor Pesach, it does not mean when Pesach finishes. It means until when are you going to ask for rain on Pesach? When the Shliach Tzibur comes on Pesach and he stops, when he goes on the Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, When he comes on Pesach, that's when you stop. What's by Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, right? It means on Shachrit and Musaf, obviously. Okay, that's what the Gemara answers. That's Rav Yosef. So now, what are you guys gonna ask me?
Turn it off, so we don't get embarrassed.
Abaye pounced on him. Abaye comes and he says, "She'ela b'Yom Tov miika." He says, "What? You ask for things on Yom Tov? Since when do you ask for things on Yom Tov?" So mi ika is there is. Mi ika is there. Hayim yesh she'ela b'Yom Tov. Is there she'ela on Yom Tov? So what are you talking about now? On Yom Tov Rishon Shel Pesach, that's Pshat Shi'avod Pesach. You understand? So Amalei, he comes and he answers him. You do. You do have She'ela b'Yom Tov. When? Sho'el meturgeman. There's a meturgeman. Meturgeman, no. Meturgeman is there used to be a translator who used to come and they used to give shiurim. The translator, which is the meturgeman, used to come. I don't have the, and the meturgeman used to come and he used to say the tentan marta libracha by itself, not as a bracha in Amidah, because there's no tentan marta libracha in Amidah, but he used to say it on its own. So therefore, since the meturgeman would say the tentan marta is the thing, so therefore they would actually mention in Yom Tov. There was she'ela. They would say the tentan marta libracha. They would say it not as a bracha, meaning it wouldn't be like a part of Amidah, but they would say it in the shiur. So says the Gemara, if the tzibur doesn't need it, so why is the meturgeman going to ask for it? So answers the Gemara, machvarta kedeula. You're right. We're going back to Ula. Ula came and he gave the answer to square one. What was the answer square one? The answer square one was that there's two Tanaim in Shitat Rabbi Yehuda. So we go back to that original answer. And we continue with the Hashem.